Welcome back. Tonight we're stepping into the cracks. Those thin places where ordinary life stutters, repeats, or quietly rearranges itself. Call them glitches, call them coincidences, call them proof that reality is stitched together with loose thread. Whatever they are, you'll feel them. Settle in, dim the room, and listen for the places where your memory doesn't line up with the world outside your window. Here's story 1. I passed myself on a dead-end street. The morning felt rinse clean, wet leaves along the curb, the kind of white sky that makes colors look extra honest. Noah zipped his favorite moss green hoodie and stepped off his porch, hands already hunting for warmth in the kangaroo pocket. He took the same route he'd walked 100 Tuesdays in a row, sycamore to larch, larch to the cafe with the wobbly table in the corner, and the barista who remembered his order. He could map every crack in the sidewalk with his eyes closed. Halfway down the block, he noticed someone coming the opposite way. Nothing special at first, shoulders slightly hunched, a quick, utilitarian stride. Familiar gait, Noah thought, right up until the distance collapsed, and he looked up from the glow of his phone. The world clicked, like a camera shutter. It was him. Not, "That guy kind of looks like me." Not, "Oh, that's my cousin from a weird angle." Him. Wearing the exact moss green hoodie with the frayed seam near the pocket, the same chipped lace eyelet on the left sneaker, even the little paint constellation on the knee from that midnight apartment repaint. Noah stopped. The other Noah didn't. Their shoulders skimmed past the same air. The the copy, kept going, eyes forward, as if Noah were a lamppost. The copy turned onto Beach, wrong move. Beach dead-ended at a chain-link lot and a boarded house with a porch that dipped like a sigh. Noah jerked after him, shoes slapping damp concrete, breath fogging the air. He hit the corner and silence. Beach lay still, puddles bright as coins. No footsteps. No retreating figure. The slumped porch. The fence rattling a little from his own momentum. That was it. He checked behind the maples, behind the dented blue mailbox where kids hid Amazon packages from their parents. He even cupped his hands to the plywood windows of the abandoned house, blinking into the stale dark. Nothing. When Noah finally reached the cafe, Maria took one look and said, "You look like the ghost, honey," and slid him water before he could speak. He tried to tell her. The words wouldn't line up. People say the mind fills gaps. So Noah went back. He timed it. Same hour, same Tuesday, even the same socks. A dumb superstition, but superstition is just hope with poor posture. Week after week he turned that corner onto Beach and got the same answer. The empty lot, the boarded house, the light ringing through leaves. The world felt like a locked phone. He knew something was in there, just out of reach. He brought a friend once, Gabe, a practical guy with the warmth of a woodshop teacher. They waited. "Maybe you saw a mirror in a window," Gabe said. "Angles can do that." Noah nodded because nodding is easier than saying. I watched myself breathe. Months later, rain came down in a steady thread. Noah rounded Beach again and the air shifted. He felt it more than saw it, the way you feel an elevator stop. The boards on the old house's windows seemed newer. A padlock on the gate gleamed like a fresh tooth. He took a step and remembered the exact brush of his double sleeve passing his own. The fabric. The weight. That small, stubborn proof that at least two versions of him were walking around with the same tear and the same hoodie. He didn't chase anything this time. He stood in the rain until his hood grew heavy and thought, if there are copies of me, which one of us is the copy? And which one of us made the wrong turn first? The thought followed him home like a shadow that refused to keep to the ground. Story 2. A text from across the table. Maya and Tessa used the break room like a ritual. Mismatched mugs, a humming fridge with a magnet shaped like a cat, and a square table that always wobbled until you found the sweet spot. "There's a place on Westbrook with handmade pasta," Tessa said, tearing her sandwich diagonally, always diagonally. Their phones lay face up between them, silent, forgotten props. Then Maya's lit up from Tessa. "Where are you? Been looking everywhere. Are you still at work?" Tessa was mid-sentence about Pappardelle, hands nowhere near her phone. Maya pushed her screen across the table. Tessa frowned, flipped her own over, and scrolled. The same message sat in their thread, timestamp 30 seconds ago. Tessa's phone had sent it while face down and untouched. They went hunting through settings like mechanics. No automations. No scheduled sends. No third-party apps with permission to be weird. Tessa called her carrier. The rep tried to make the word, impossible, sound helpful. Could be a spoof, he said. But spoofing shows up to the recipient, not in the sender's outbox. That night Maya sat in her quiet apartment, TV flickering blue in the corner like distant lightning, and thought about realities stacked like trays. In one, Tessa was having pasta with her at a wobbly table. In another, she was walking the hall, texting, "Where are you?" Because Maya wasn't where she was supposed to be in that other place. Because in that other place, the chair across from Tessa was empty. The next day, Tessa came by Maya's desk with 2 coffees and a joke loaded like a safety. "If I text you while looking at you, just ignore me." It fell flat in the air. They both glanced at their phones at the same time, and the same thought flashed across 2 faces: please don't buzz. The office hum carried on, the printer stuttering, the elevator chiming, and somehow the hum felt thinner, stretched over something neither of them could name. They never ate in that break room again. Not together. Story 3: The Hour That Vanished. Callum salted the chicken like a man trying to draw a straight line. 6:15. He muttered, tapping the stove to life. Oil shivered in the pan. The kitchen clock ticked with that cheap, cheerful insistence of rental clocks. 20 to 25 minutes, he told himself, because precise dinners make the rest of life feel negotiable. He blinked, nothing dramatic, just the ordinary shudder every eye is owed, and the kind of silence fell that makes you notice your own breathing. The clock said 7:20. His stomach did a small, dumb roll. He looked at the pan. The chicken lay pale and slick, edges unkissed by heat. The oil had lost its shimmer. The burner felt like a cold coin under his palm. Phones, watches, TV. 7:20, 7:21, 7:22, each device like a witness sworn in with the same testimony. He half laughed, the sad kind of laugh that keeps your throat from closing, and slid the pan off the burner with the same caution you use to move a sleeping child. You fell asleep standing up, he told himself. But his body remembered. It remembered the heat on his face seconds ago, the tiny crackling song oil sings when it approves of the temperature. He ordered noodles and ate them on the couch straight from the carton, staring at the stove like it might file a second report. The cartoon on TV didn't help. Laughter tracks feel mean when the world has slipped. For a week he checked too many clocks. He set a timer and a second timer to police the first. Everything behaved. Then Friday arrived and the kitchen was the same, a brave little plant on the sill, a note magnet to the fridge, salt in its jar like sifted snow. Don't blink, he whispered, and felt foolish, and blinked because that's what eyes do. The timer chirped at 23 minutes. He plated chicken that made sense. But he caught himself staring at the clock anyway, measuring the shape of the minute hand, as if memory were a ruler the world had snapped in half and left on his counter. Story 4: The Voice from an Empty House. Jared knew the sound of his mother's voice the way you know a song you haven't heard since childhood, down to the way it curls around your name. Saturday, 3:03 p.m., he was upstairs sorting citations for a psychology paper, rain ticking against the window. Jared? Can you come down, please? It floated up from the kitchen, wrapped in that practical tone she used for groceries or tight lids. Coming! He yelled back, shoving his chair so it squeaked across the rug. He jogged downstairs, already reaching to take a bag from her. The kitchen was an arrangement of quiet things, a fruit bowl, a folded dish towel, a radio not even pretending to be on. No car in the driveway. No shoes by the mat. Just rain. He phoned her. Hey, kiddo! She said over the clatter and soft echo of a supermarket. What's up? He asked if she'd swung by. She laughed. I've been arguing with a display of canned tomatoes for 20 minutes. They compared clocks and timelines like detectives. The math did not care about his heart rate. He checked the basement, the backyard, even the silly places you check to feel thorough, under the dining table, behind the door that never quite shuts because the hinge is a little proud. The house held its breath and offered him nothing. Jared's psych professor would have had a list: stress, pareidolia, hypnopompic bleed-through, terms shaped like handles so you can pick the moment up without touching it. But there's the clinical, and then there's the way his mother's voice found him with the exact upward lilt on please. That night his notes blurred. He kept looking up, expecting the air to organize itself into a person. When she got home, she called, "Jared?" And he flinched hard enough to spill his pen cup. The voice was the same, but so was everything else: the click of the door, the scrape of keys. He stood there, wet-eyed and sheepish, as she took his face in her hands and said, "What's wrong?" "You were here," he told her. "And you weren't." She kissed his forehead like people do when a child wakes from a nightmare and the nightmare refuses to explain itself. Sometimes a glitch is loud, a skipped hour, a vanished double. Sometimes it's quiet, a voice where a person should be, a text from a reality that almost overlaps yours. If one of these stories tugged at something you've buried under routine, tell me in the comments. Like if you're still with me, and if you're new here, hit subscribe. I read strange Reddit stories like these every night, so you've got something to drift off to. Anyway, let's get into story 5, 2 roads, one morning. Ethan swore by routine. Wake at 7:05, pour black coffee, lock the door, start the car. The commute offered 2 options: the 25-minute highway where his brain could idle, or the longer surface streets lined with stoplights and impatient parents on school runs. He always chose the highway. Except Monday. He remembered the exact lift of the steering wheel as he merged onto the ramp. A lumbering delivery truck hemming him in, the radio gossiping about some pop star's latest scandal. His watch said 7:53 when he parked in the company lot. Done. Easy. But when he closed his eyes later at his desk, another reel played in his head, equally sharp. The surface route. Brakes at Elm Street while a golden retriever tugged a jogger across. A kid dropping a juice box at the crosswalk. The weight of boredom, the hum of his own fingers on the steering wheel. Same destination. Same arrival time, 7:53. 2 commutes. 2 memories. 1 morning. That night he retraced the highway drive. The truck existed. The exact graffiti under the overpass matched. He retraced the surface streets too. Same jogger, same golden retriever, same stoplight sequence burned into his mind. Both realities carried receipts. His co-workers shrugged it off. "Maybe you're mixing days," they said. But Ethan felt the difference. Ordinary memory blurs. These were crisp as Polaroids. He carried 2 timelines in one skull, like holding 2 incompatible versions of a film reel that somehow both fit the projector. Which version had the world chosen? He still doesn't know. Over the next week Ethan became obsessed. He wrote down every detail of each memory commute in a notebook: license plates, songs on the radio, the jogger's shoes, even the exact time he had stopped at red lights. To his horror, when he drove the routes again, those details existed in both places. The jogger with the golden retriever? He saw her again on Elm Street on Tuesday. But when he took the highway on Wednesday, there she was jogging along the service road near the on-ramp. Same dog, same stride, same neon trainers. 2 places at once, just like his own split memory. It began to feel less like a misfire in his brain and more like 2 slightly different cities overlapping, bleeding into each other. He found himself questioning not only the commute but everything in between. Did he drink coffee twice that morning? Did he have 1 phone call with his mother or 2? When he checked his call log, there was 1 record, but his memory offered 2 conversations with the same words spoken in slightly different tones. On Friday, he left early, determined to catch the glitch in the act. He parked at a diner near the fork in the road where he usually decided between highway and surface streets. He sat there with the car off, staring at the split, daring reality to choose for him. A delivery truck roared past toward the highway, identical to the one from his memory. At the same time, a jogger with a golden retriever appeared at the crosswalk on Elm Street, sneakers flashing. Both routes were replaying themselves like film strips demanding he pick a reel. Heart pounding, Ethan closed his eyes and whispered, "Which version is real?" When he opened them, he was already in his office lot, engine cooling, clock flashing 7:53. His notebook sat open on the passenger seat, a new page filled with shaky handwriting he didn't remember writing. Both are true. Stop choosing. He sat frozen in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, afraid to check which pen he had used. Because if it matched the pen in his desk drawer upstairs, then which version of him had written it? Story 6, My Dog in Two Rooms. Leah's collie, Jasper, was the kind of shadow who never let her out of sight. That evening he was curled in his dented leather spot on the couch, nose tucked into his tail, collar tags still. Leah tiptoed with the quiet satisfaction of cleaning up wineglasses after company, trying not to wake him. Then came the jingle. Soft, metallic, rhythmic, from the kitchen. She froze. Her eyes slid back to the couch, Jasper still sleeping, chest rising and falling. Yet the collar bells sang again from the other room. Leah stepped to the kitchen doorway. And there Jasper stood, tail swishing, hopeful eyes on his food bowl. His tongue flicked across his snout as if dinner had been promised. Her gaze snapped back to the couch. Jasper was still there, sunk into the leather, paws twitching in sleep. 2 dogs. Same white patch on the chest. Same nick on the left ear. One waiting for food, one dreaming. 30 seconds stretched, surreal, until she blinked hard. When her eyes opened, the couch was empty, only the dented cushion and a faint warmth left. Jasper stood in the kitchen, stretching as though he'd been there all along. For the rest of the night Leah caught herself glancing between the couch and the bowl, wondering which version had been real, and whether the copy had been the dreamer or the hungry one. Later that night, Leah crouched by Jasper's bed, watching him breathe. The steady rhythm of his chest was grounding, but she couldn't shake the image of him duplicated. Out of curiosity, she held her phone up to record video. The house was quiet, the only sound the hum of the fridge and Jasper's occasional sigh. For several minutes nothing happened. Then, faint in the background of the recording, the collar jingled again, though Jasper remained still in the frame. Leah's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. When she replayed the clip, the jingling was gone. Just silence and Jasper's sleepy snore. It was as if the house itself had erased the proof. For the next week, Leah noticed small anomalies. Once, Jasper came bounding down the hall while she was already scratching his ears on the couch. Another time, he barked at the back door while still snoozing in his usual spot. Each time, the duplicate disappeared in a blink, leaving her questioning her senses. Friends laughed when she told them, "You're tired, Leah, it's just stress." But the warm dents left behind on cushions, the faint smell of Jasper's fur lingering in 2 places at once, told her otherwise. She began to dread quiet evenings, because that's when the jingling would start again, echoing from empty rooms. Some nights, she whispered, "Which one of you is my real dog?" The silence afterward felt almost like an answer. Story 7, The Stranger Who Knew My Name. Julian's commute blurred into sameness. Same subway, same exit, same 6 blocks past glossy glass offices where people hurried as though they mattered more than physics. That Thursday, a man in a navy suit broke the blur. "Julian!" The man called, lifting his hand as though greeting a brother. Average face, thinning hair, glasses. But his confidence was absolute. He closed the distance, clasped Julian's hand, and grinned. "Great to see you again. How have you been?" Julian's stomach lurched. He didn't know this man. Not a maybe acquaintance, not a face from college. Nothing. He stammered, "I think you've mistaken me." The man chuckled softly, almost paternal. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course we've met." He even patted Julian's shoulder before strolling into the crowd, whistling as if nothing were off. Julian stood in the river of commuters, frozen. The man had known his name, his eye color, the cadence of greeting someone you've shared years with. But Julian's memory was a clean slate. That was weeks ago. He's still walking those blocks every morning, scanning faces, hoping, or fearing, that the man might return with more certainty than Julian has about his own life. That night Julian couldn't focus on dinner. He replayed the handshake, how the man's palm was dry and warm, how his grip was firm like an old colleague's. He could almost feel familiarity pressed into his skin. He even smelled faint aftershave, the kind his uncle used to wear. These were details the brain invents only if there's truth behind them. But he knew, absolutely, that he had never seen this man. He dug out old yearbooks, work rosters, even scrolled through LinkedIn, searching for a face with thinning brown hair and square glasses. Nothing matched. The blank space where recognition should have been felt heavier than the memory itself. 2 weeks later, he dreamed of the man. In the dream, they sat together in a cafe, laughing about college days Julian had never lived. He woke with the taste of bitter coffee still on his tongue and the man's voice echoing, "We've met before." The following morning, Julian skipped his usual route, walking 3 extra blocks to avoid 5th Street. But at a crosswalk, a voice rang out again, cheerful. "Julian!" He spun, only to find an empty sidewalk, strangers passing by without interest. Since then, Julian has kept his headphones in, eyes low. But every so often, in the hiss of subway brakes or the chatter of strangers, he swears he hears his own name in that voice. Story 8. Keys that fell into nowhere. Morning rush, toast still in the toaster, laptop bag half zipped. Miles finally fished his car keys from his pocket, but they slipped, glinting once in the hallway light. He watched them fall between his shoes, heard the crisp jingle as they bounced on the hardwood. He crouched instantly. Nothing. Bare floorboards, clean mat, not a thing to pick up. He knelt, heart racing, checking under the shoe rack, under the table, even under the mat. Nothing. He tore the hallway apart. The space was 4 feet wide, empty except for a single table. Nowhere for metal to vanish. He searched the whole apartment, lifting couch cushions, shaking out blankets, even checking the absurd places, bathroom sink, refrigerator shelf, because panic makes fools of us all. Nothing. He called in late to work, used a spare key, but 3 weeks later the originals never surfaced. He'd vacuumed, dusted, even moved furniture. Gone. He tells people he lost them because what else do you say? That you saw your keys collapse through the floor like pixels disappearing into a glitch? Sometimes at night, he swears he hears the faint metallic clink again, echoing from nowhere in particular. The disappearance gnawed at him. Miles began replaying the fall in his head like a crime scene. He could still see the way the sunlight hit the keys as they tumbled, hear the pitch of the jingle. He even marked the exact spot on the floor where they should have landed with a piece of tape. Night after night he knelt by that tape, pressing his palm to the boards, half expecting them to open like a trapdoor. Once, while crouched there, he felt a strange coolness seeping from the wood, like the draft of a hidden vent. But when he called the repairman to check for gaps, there were none. Solid boards. No cavities. Weeks later, while cleaning, Miles heard the jingle again, this time from behind the wall. He pressed his ear to the plaster, convinced the keys were rattling just out of reach, locked in some impossible cavity. He even knocked holes in the drywall, leaving scars his landlord would hate. Nothing was inside. Just air and dust. Yet the sound kept coming back, faint clinks at night, as though the keys were reminding him they existed elsewhere. He's since replaced them, of course, but he refuses to throw out the spare. Because part of him believes the originals aren't lost at all. They're waiting, on the other side of whatever thin layer separates our world from wherever objects go when reality hiccups. Keys vanishing into thin air. Dogs existing in 2 places at once. Strangers who greet you by name when you've never met. Each one leaves us questioning, how many cracks exist in the world around us? Let's step further into the unknown. Story 9. The stoplight that froze time. Laura's drive home rarely varied. 15 minutes of suburban streets, radio humming, the world moving in its ordinary grooves. At one intersection she always caught a red. She expected it, even counted on it to sip water or shuffle playlists. Friday, 6:07 p.m., she stopped first in line under the suspended glow of the traffic light. Red, steady, nothing unusual. A minute passed. 2. She set her phone down, focused on the light. Still red. The sedan beside her waited politely, the truck behind idled. Calm faces stared straight ahead, hands at 10 and 2. No honks. No restless tapping. The silence grew thick, uncanny. By 6:10 the radio was still playing, text still pinged her phone, but the light refused to change. The world outside the cars seemed paused, air heavy as syrup. She watched her digital clock roll to 6:20. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. And then, click. Green. No fade, no shift. One blink red, the next blink green. The other cars surged forward naturally, as though nothing had been wrong. She followed, heart hammering, pulled over, and checked her phone. 6:08. Only a minute gone. But she remembered 13. Remembered the feeling of air tightening around her, remembered the mannequin still drivers who had become part of the set. To this day, she can describe every smudge on that sedan's bumper, every bead of condensation on her windshield, preserved like a painting. Was it a trick of memory, or did the world pause while she kept time alone? That weekend she tested it. Saturday, she drove deliberately through the same intersection at the same time. The light changed normally. Sunday too. No pause, no heavy silence. But Monday evening, back at 6:07 sharp, it happened again. The red refused to change, the cars locked into stillness. This time she forced herself to look closely at the other drivers. Their eyes were open but glassy. One man's hand froze halfway to scratching his nose. A woman's lips parted midward, frozen in conversation with an empty headset. They weren't waiting. They weren't even conscious. They were mannequins made of flesh. The moment it turned green again, everything snapped back. The man finished scratching, the woman resumed talking, cars rolled forward. Laura drove home on shaking legs. She hasn't told anyone what she saw, not her coworkers, not her family. Because how do you explain watching time halt for everyone but yourself? Now, every evening, she catches herself dreading that stoplight. Sometimes it changes normally, sometimes it doesn't. Each time it doesn't, she feels like she's been chosen, plucked out of the stream to watch the world stand still. And each time, she fears the pause might last longer. What if next time the light never turns green? Story 10. The dream that happened the next day. Sunday night, Oliver dreamed in more detail than waking life sometimes gives. He and his friend Nathan sat in their usual deli booth. Red vinyl that stuck to bare arms, Tony shouting at suppliers on the phone behind the counter. Nathan worried aloud about an upcoming job interview, picking tomatoes off his sandwich one by one. Oliver told him to stop overthinking and just be himself. The dream lingered past morning. He could taste the mustard, hear the hiss of the espresso machine. It wasn't dream fuzzy. It was memory sharp. Tuesday, Nathan called. Lunch? Tony's Deli? Oliver went, stomach cold with recognition. They sat down. Nathan ordered turkey with tomatoes he immediately scraped aside, and launched into talk about the marketing interview at a tech company. Same nervous tug at his collar. Same questions about clothing and resumes. Tony bickered on the phone in the background, word for word as Oliver had heard in his sleep. The only difference was Oliver's silence. In the dream he had given reassurance. In reality his throat locked. Nathan asked if he was okay. He just nodded, forcing down a bite of pastrami that tasted identical to his dream. That night he lay awake asking himself, did he glimpse the future, or did dreaming it somehow set the track for reality to follow? The following week, Oliver noticed a pattern. Small things he dreamed began repeating themselves in the waking world. A dream of Nathan spilling coffee on his tie played out exactly 3 mornings later. A dream of Tony changing the light bulb above the deli counter happened word for word, even down to the curse Tony muttered when he dropped the old bulb. Each time, Oliver woke knowing the scene before it arrived. He tried ignoring it, but the precision made him restless. Finally, he tested it. One night he dreamed of Nathan's interview again, this time with a strange twist. In the dream, Nathan fumbled, stuttered, dropped his resume on the floor, and left the interview ashamed. When Oliver woke, he called Nathan immediately and begged him to reschedule. Nathan laughed it off, said he couldn't. He went anyway. That evening, he called Oliver sounding crushed. The interview had gone badly. Oliver didn't tell him he'd already seen it. Now Oliver dreads his own dreams, because every time he closes his eyes, he wonders, am I watching tomorrow? And if so, can anything I say change what I've already seen? Story 11. The Shop That Never Was. 3 months ago, Eli strolled down Main Street, a place he knew like his own kitchen. Every storefront mapped in memory. Except that day, between Murphy's Hardware and the Barber's, a narrow shop glowed with warm lamplight. A hand-painted sign read Curiosities and Oddments. The windows brimmed with antique clocks, music boxes, jewelry. Inside, tall shelves leaned with treasures that smelled of cedar and thyme. An elderly woman greeted him with a smile. Looking for anything in particular? He bought a brass compass, its engravings swirling like ocean currents. She wrapped it in brown paper, tied string around it, and wrote out a receipt by hand. Come back any time, she said warmly as he left. 2 days later, Eli returned with a friend. The alley was back. No shop. Just a fence across gravel. Murphy swore nothing had occupied that sliver of space for decades. The barber agreed. But the compass sat solid on Eli's desk, cold brass under his fingers. The paper wrapping remained, the receipt folded into his wallet. He showed both to his friend, who grew pale. Then where did you get it? Eli still doesn't have an answer. Eli examined the compass obsessively. Its needle quivered in strange ways, sometimes spinning in circles even when he stood still indoors. Once it pointed not north but directly at the empty alley where the shop had been. He carried it back, held it up to the chain-link fence, and the needle stilled as though satisfied. A chill passed through him, as if the shop were still there, just invisible to everyone else. Late one night, curiosity gnawed too hard to ignore. Eli went back at midnight. The alley glowed faintly, as though lit from within. When he blinked, it was gone, just shadows and chain link. But when he opened his palm, the compass needle spun so violently it snapped off inside the glass. Since then, Eli avoids Main Street. He keeps the broken compass in a drawer, but sometimes he hears faint music boxes playing from it, muffled and distant. He's convinced the shop is still waiting, somewhere between here and whatever place swallowed it whole. And deep down, he knows if he ever goes back, the shopkeeper will greet him again. Story 12. My Own Voice on the Phone. One Thursday evening, Mia's phone rang. The caller ID displayed her own number. She almost ignored it, assuming a scam. But curiosity answered. Hello? She said. Hello? Her own voice replied. Exact pitch, exact inflection. Her blood went cold. She tried again. Who is this? Her own voice echoed back after a half-second delay. Who is this? For 3 minutes, everything she said was repeated by herself, only half a beat behind, like talking to a warped mirror. In panic she blurted, Purple Elephant Tuesday! Seconds later, Purple Elephant Tuesday? In her voice, with her tone of bafflement. Finally she said, I'm going to hang up now. And back came, I'm going to hang up now. She ended the call, hands shaking. The phone company insisted no such glitch was possible. No system could record and mimic her voice in real time. Yet she had heard her own sighs, her own accent, the tiny rasp from cold she'd had as a child. Since then, Mia watches every incoming call like it might be her again, on the other side of the line. That night Mia couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like a whisper of her own voice. She played back the call from memory again and again, remembering the slight pauses. Too organic to be a recording, too uncanny to be coincidence. Out of desperation, she dialed her own number. It went straight to voicemail, as expected. But an hour later, at 2:14 a.m., her phone buzzed. Caller ID Mia. She let it ring until it cut off, paralyzed with fear. When she checked the call log in the morning, the missed call wasn't there. Over the following week, small things began to happen. She'd leave her phone on the counter and hear faint snippets of her own voice drifting from it, mid-sentence, even though no call was active. Once, she swore she heard herself humming the exact lullaby her grandmother used to sing, something she hadn't thought about in years. The scariest moment came when she picked up to answer an unknown number, and before she could speak, her voice whispered, "Don't answer these anymore." She slammed the phone down. Now, every time her screen lights up, she hesitates. Because she no longer knows if she'll be talking to a telemarketer, a friend, or herself. Story 13. The Man Who Vanished on the Bus. Route 23, 7:45 a.m. Sarah always rode the same bus, same seat, same cast of familiar commuters. That morning, a man in a gray suit with a briefcase boarded at Maple Street. He stood by her row, scrolling his phone. Normal as rain. Stop by stop, he stayed there. At the financial district, most people filed off. Sarah glanced at him, still standing, still gripping the rail. The doors closed, the bus pulled away. She looked back up seconds later. He was gone. She scanned the bus, empty seats, open aisle. He hadn't walked past. No one else reacted. "Did you see where that man went?" she asked the woman opposite. A frown. "What man?" At the last stop, Sarah asked the driver. "No one in a gray suit got on this morning." The driver's certainty stung sharper than the disappearance. Because Sarah could still picture the man's watch glinting, still hear the rustle of his newspaper app, still feel the press of his shoulder near her seat. But officially, he'd never been there at all. 4 days after, Sarah couldn't shake the image of him. She tried convincing herself it was stress, maybe her mind filling empty space. But the memory was too sharp, the briefcase scuffed on the corner, the reflection of sunlight on his glasses. She even remembered the faint cologne, citrusy, expensive, that had drifted toward her when the bus jolted. "Those aren't things your mind invents?" She asked around at work, casually describing him. A colleague frowned and said, "That sounds like David." "But David died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Used to work in the same building as us." That answer lodged deep in her brain. The next week, Sarah sat in the same seat again, heart pounding, scanning every passenger. At Maple Street, the doors hissed open. For a second, she thought she saw the man, gray suit, briefcase. But when she blinked, it was just an empty seat. No one else reacted. She's ridden that bus for months since, always glancing up at Maple Street. She's never seen him again. But some mornings, when the bus slows at that stop, she swears she feels the air shift, like someone invisible is boarding, briefcase in hand, taking up space that only she can notice. Phone calls from yourself. Passengers who disappear without a trace. Everyday moments bending into impossibility. If those made you uneasy, brace yourself. The next stories blur the line between proof and memory, where even photographs and timepieces can't be trusted. Story 14. The Photo That Changed Overnight. Megan had a wedding photo on her dresser she'd glanced at so many times it was like wallpaper. Cousins, uncles, aunts all arranged in neat rows around the bride and groom. 20 people, maybe more. Every time she looked, her cousin Luke stood in the back left, navy suit, toothy grin. She remembered dancing with him that night, remembered his clumsy but hilarious toast. The photo was proof of that day. One night before bed, she paused longer than usual. Something looked off. She lifted the frame and stared. Luke wasn't there. The gap where he had stood was gone. People shifted closer, smiling as though he never existed. Panic prickled her skin. She dug through her computer for the original digital file. Same thing, no Luke. Perfectly natural arrangement, as if he never posed for it. She called her sister, who swore Luke had been there. Back row, left side, blue suit, she said without hesitation. Megan emailed her the photo. Silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. But he was there. Luke himself laughed when she asked. Of course I was. Remember my speech? He even described the suit. But when she sent him the picture, his voice wavered. That's wrong. I was standing right there. Megan still keeps the frame on her dresser. Some mornings it feels heavier, as though carrying two conflicting truths at once. Over the following days, Megan obsessed. She texted relatives, demanding they send her their copies. Each one showed the same thing: Luke missing, the group perfectly composed without him. Some cousins remembered him being there, others said they weren't sure anymore. When she called her aunt, the bride herself, she was shocked to hear her say, Luke didn't come to the wedding. He had the flu that week. Megan nearly dropped the phone. Luke had danced with her, spilled champagne on her dress, joked about the cake. How could her aunt not remember? Late one night, Megan dreamt of the wedding again, but in the dream Luke was there. He raised his glass, gave the same speech she remembered, smiled with the same crooked grin. When she woke, her throat hurt from crying. The photo remained unchanged, Luke erased from the record. Megan has started to avoid looking at it, but sometimes she catches it out of the corner of her eye. One face in the back row flickers, almost as though Luke is trying to push his way back in. She wonders which memory is real, and whether the photograph is correcting history, or rewriting it. Story 15. The watch that stopped at 3:42. James wore his grandfather's watch every day. Simple, leather strap, not expensive but steady. One Friday, sitting in a meeting, he checked it, 3:42. He jotted a note, glanced back 10 minutes later. Still 3:42. The second hand froze in mid-tick. Annoyed, he pulled out his phone, 3:51. The watch had died. He resigned himself to a battery replacement. But when he got home and took it off, the second hand jerked alive. It ticked to 3:43, 3:44, as though nothing had happened. By then his phone read past 7. The next day he tested it. Sure enough, at 3:42 on the dot, the watch froze while strapped to his wrist. Time outside kept moving. His phone climbed to 3:55, 4 o'clock, but the watch refused. The moment he unbuckled it, it lurched back to life. He tried everything: other wrist, jacket pocket, even leaving it on his desk. If it touched him at 3:42, it stopped. Jewelers said the watch was perfect. No faults, no bad gears. Now every afternoon James feels the air shift at 3:42. He looks down and sees his watch hold its breath while the world exhales around him. For 15 minutes each day, he becomes the only moving thing tied to a timepiece that refuses to keep up. James began writing down exactly what happened during those frozen minutes. Birds outside still flew, his coworkers still typed, the city still breathed. Only his watch stopped. On the third day, he held his wrist up to a security camera at work, watching the red recording light. Later, when he reviewed the footage, the watch face was blurred at 3:42, a smear of light across the lens. The rest of him was clear. It was as though the camera itself refused to capture the moment. One afternoon he took the watch off before 3:42, setting it on the counter. It ticked normally. But as the clock turned to 3:42, James felt his chest tighten, as though the pause had moved inside him instead. He gasped for air, vision dimming, until he grabbed the watch again. The second hand sprang forward, and the sensation eased. He realized then, the watch wasn't broken. It was tethered to him, stopping time in its own way, forcing him into its schedule. Now, each day at 3:42, James sits quietly, afraid to resist. Because whatever force holds that watch might decide next time, not to start again. Story 16. The house with shutters that changed color. Every morning walk with her dog, Anna passed the same colonial-style house 6 blocks over. White siding, red door, cobalt blue shutters. She liked the boldness of it. Blue that bright made the place cheerful, memorable. She'd pointed it out to her husband, even thought about painting her own shutters someday. Tuesday morning, she turned the corner and froze. The shutters were red. Same shade as the door. Same weathered texture as if they'd always been that way. She stood staring for minutes, certain she was losing her mind. The paint wasn't fresh, no drops on the pavement, no tape, no scent. Just aged red shutters. At home, her husband shook his head. They've always been red. So did Mrs. Chen down the street. I remember because I wanted that same color years ago. But Anna's memory screamed blue. She could still picture how it caught the light. She walked back 3 times that week, hoping to find evidence, streaks, chips, anything. Nothing. Now every time she passes, the house looks smug, shutters neat and red, while her own memory insists she lived in a different version of the neighborhood. Anna began searching through old photos on her phone. She was sure she had taken one of her dog in front of that house because the bright shutters had matched his collar. After hours of scrolling, she found it, her dog wagging his tail in front of the white siding, red door, and red shutters. No blue. Not a hint. She nearly dropped the phone. The metadata showed the picture was taken 8 months ago, the same walk she remembered. And yet, her mind still held the vivid image of cobalt shutters shining in the morning sun. One evening, she stopped outside the house at dusk. The lights inside were off, but as the last sunlight hit the windows, she swore the shutters shimmered, red sliding into blue for half a second, like an optical illusion. She grabbed her husband, begged him to look, but he saw only red. Anna now avoids walking past that street, but sometimes she detours just far enough to glimpse the house from a distance. The shutters glare back red, defiant, as though daring her memory to contradict them. And every so often, just before dark, she catches a cobalt flash. Proof that somewhere, in some version of her neighborhood, the house still wears blue. Shutters that shift color overnight. Papers you never wrote. Faces you know existing twice in the same city. By now it's clear, the world around us might not be as solid as it seems. Let's finish with the final stories, and see just how deep these glitches can go. Story 17, The Paper I Never Wrote. Lily prided herself on schoolwork. Her AP history paper had consumed 3 weeks, research on the Holocaust, survivor testimonies, photographs, a careful conclusion she was proud of. She printed it, stapled it, turned it in on time. When the teacher handed papers back, he smiled. Excellent work on the Pacific Theater analysis, Lily. Some of your best writing. She blinked at the words. Her name was on the top, but the paper wasn't hers. It was a detailed, well-cited essay about the Battle of Midway. She had never written a word of it. She raised her hand, insisted there was a mistake. Mr. Rodriguez pulled his gray book. There in ink, Pacific Theater paper, excellent analysis. He even remembered a conversation with her about naval strategies. She remembered nothing but her Holocaust draft. That night she tore through her files. She found her notes, her outline, even her rough draft. But the final paper she'd printed and turned in? Gone. As if it had never existed. The Pacific Theater paper sat in her binder, complete with her name. A ghost assignment, graded, praised, but not hers. She still wonders, did some other Lily turn it in? And if so, what happened to the version of her who wrote about the Holocaust? Days later, she tried confronting Mr. Rodriguez again. He looked at her with genuine confusion. Lily, you've always been interested in naval history. Remember your project last year on Pearl Harbor? But she hadn't done any such project. That had been her friend Kara, not her. Lily started asking classmates if they remembered her topic. Half swore it was the Holocaust. The other half remembered her presenting slides about Midway. 2 competing versions of her existed in their minds, as though the class itself had split. That night, Lily dug through her Google Drive, desperate for proof. The Holocaust draft was still there, half finished, frozen days before the due date. The final version she remembered writing was gone. In its place sat the completed Pacific Theater paper, polished, formatted, and time-stamped at 2:14 a.m. the night she swore she was finishing her Holocaust essay. She doesn't remember typing a single word of it. Since then, Lily feels a creeping dread each time she submits homework. Because when she sees her name at the top of the page, she's no longer sure if she wrote it, or if some other version of her did. Lily started keeping a journal, trying to anchor herself in one version of reality. Every night she wrote down what she'd done that day, what assignments she was working on, the conversations she remembered having. She figured if another switch happened, she'd at least have proof of her own timeline. A week later, she opened the notebook and felt her stomach drop. Whole pages had changed. Sentences she remembered writing in blue ink were now in black. Notes about her Holocaust paper had been replaced by summaries of naval strategies. Even her handwriting looked slightly different, still hers, but slanted in a way she never wrote. She flipped page after page, feeling like the book was rewriting itself beneath her fingertips. At school the next morning, she asked Kara about their old Pearl Harbor project. Kara looked at her with surprise. "I never did a project on Pearl Harbor. That was you, remember?" Lily felt dizzy. Her version of the world was crumbling. The more she asked, the more contradictions she found. It was like two timelines had blended into one classroom, and everyone else had simply chosen the path where Lily had always been the naval history girl. Her breaking point came when Mr. Rodriguez asked her to present her paper aloud to the class. She stood at the podium, the Pacific Theater essay in her trembling hands. The words read like hers, the cadence of the sentences felt familiar, but she couldn't recall writing a single one. As she spoke, she felt detached, like she was reading aloud a script someone else had placed there. The class nodded, taking notes, treating her analysis as though it had always been hers. Only Kara frowned in the back row, her pen still. After class, Kara pulled her aside. "You keep saying you wrote about the Holocaust. I remember that too. But now I don't know what's real." Lily wanted to cry with relief. Someone else remembered. That night she checked her journal again. The pages about Kara had changed too. In this version, Kara never existed in her class at all. Her name had been erased from group projects, from attendance lists, even from Lily's photos. The only place Kara still lived was in Lily's memory, and Lily feared she might be next. Story 18. The Friend Who Existed Twice. Darren left the cafe with a bagel in hand and almost collided with his best friend. Same face, same scar above the eyebrow from a skateboarding accident years ago, same rasp in his laugh from years of smoking. "Evan?" Darren grinned. "When did you get back?" The man looked blank. "Sorry, do I know you?" Darren laughed nervously. "Cut it out. You were supposed to be in Chicago with your family this weekend." But the man shook his head. "Name's Daniel. I think you've mistaken me for someone else." Every detail was Evan, the way he shifted his weight when standing, the tilt of his smile. Darren listed childhood stories, mutual friends. The man grew uncomfortable, insisted again his name was Daniel, and walked away into the crowd. Shaken, Darren called Evan. He answered from an airport terminal, background noisy with flight announcements. "Boarding soon," he said cheerfully. "What's up?" Darren never told him about Daniel. Never explained how he'd just spoken to a man who was exactly him, standing on Main Street in the same city at the same time. But Darren sometimes wonders which version was really his friend, and which one was the stranger. That night Darren couldn't stop replaying the encounter. The scar above the eyebrow was too specific to be coincidence. Even the man's clothes matched Evan's usual style, a black hoodie and worn jeans. He thought maybe it was a twin, a cousin, some unknown relative. But Evan's family had no such double. Out of curiosity, Darren went back to the cafe the next day, scanning the crowd. And there he was again, Daniel, sitting at an outdoor table, sipping coffee. Darren froze, heart hammering. Before he could approach, the man looked up, met his eyes, and smiled with the same exact grin Evan used whenever he won at poker. Darren blinked, and the table was empty. From then on, Darren started noticing him everywhere. Across the street while Darren walked to work. Standing at the edge of the park while Evan was texting him from another state. Each time, the figure would watch quietly, then disappear into the crowd. Darren has never told Evan the truth. How could he? How do you tell someone they exist twice, in two places, and that one of them doesn't acknowledge you? Sometimes Darren wonders if he mixed them up from the start. What if the Evan he grew up with was always the copy, and the stranger is the original? That thought keeps him awake more nights than he admits. Darren began testing himself, desperate to prove he wasn't imagining things. He snapped photos on his phone whenever he thought he saw Daniel. But every time he checked, the images showed empty benches, blank sidewalks, or blurred figures without faces. Once, he caught a clear shot of a man across the street who looked exactly like Evan. But when he zoomed in, the face dissolved into static, like pixels collapsing. He showed the photo to a coworker, who said it looked corrupted, maybe a glitch. Darren knew better. His phone had captured something it wasn't supposed to. He tried confronting Evan directly. Have you ever been mistaken for someone else? Someone who looks exactly like you? Evan chuckled. All the time. I've got one of those faces, I guess. But when Darren pushed, Evan grew tense. Why? You've seen him, haven't you? For a moment, his friend's eyes hardened, calculating, before softening again. Darren couldn't shake the suspicion that Evan knew more than he let on. One evening, Darren followed Daniel. He saw him leaving the park at dusk, walking with the same uneven stride Evan had after spraining his ankle years ago. Darren trailed him through side streets until Daniel turned into an alley. When Darren rounded the corner, the alley was empty, except for the sound of someone whistling Evan's favorite song. The melody hung in the air, disembodied, before fading into silence. That night Darren dreamed of two Evans sitting across from each other in the cafe. One wore the hoodie, one wore a suit. Both smiled at him, both claimed to be the real one. He woke drenched in sweat, his phone buzzing with a text from Evan, "You're not supposed to follow him." Darren never told anyone about that message. He deleted it instantly, but the timestamp burned into his mind, 3:17 a.m., the exact time he had woken from the dream. Since then, he's stopped looking too closely at crowds. Because deep down, he's terrified he'll find out there isn't just one double. There might be more. And that's where tonight's journey ends. 18 stories of reality bending at the seams, from voices that shouldn't exist, to photographs that rewrite themselves, to friends who walk in two places at once. Each one a reminder that the ordinary world might not be as stable as it looks. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps more than you know. And if you're new here, consider subscribing, because every night we dive into more Reddit tales of mystery, horror, and the strange glitches that keep you awake long after the screen goes dark.